Thanks. Thanks. Calling this Urban Renewal Agency budget meeting to order. First item of business is to elect committees, or not committees, elect the committee chairperson. Accept the nominations or volunteers
For this meeting only.
for this one only. Don't jump up all at once.
I nominate Grant.
Thanks.
Second.
Nomination second.
Done.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Yay. Opposed? Okay, I encourage somebody else to do it next year just to get some experience. Thanks. That's my only notes for you guys. I'm chair. Do we need a vice chair for this? Can't remember.
It's only one meeting, so as long as you promise to stay here the whole time.
Just say the entire time. Approval of minutes from May 11th, 2022.
I will move we approve the minutes from May 11th, 2022.
I will second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion, additions, corrections? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes approved. Budget presentation.
Great. Before I start, do we want to do introductions? I don't know if everybody, we have some new members here, so. Start, I'm Abigail Elder, I'm your city manager and I think de facto urban renewal administrator.
Hi, I'm Kate Hoffman. I'm on the Urban Renewal Advisory Committee, the Planning Commission member on that committee. Previously was on the River Affordable Housing Task Force.
I'm Jeff Hunt. I'm on the URAC as well.
Jack Trumbull. I'm on Urban Renewal Advisory Council and a business owner up in the Heights.
Clint Harris, also on your this side of the table. Business owner in the Heights.
Megan Saunders, City Council.
Doug Stupina, City Council, top enthusiast.
Ramberg, volunteer.
Mark Zay Miller, City Council.
Urban Renewal
District. Sorry. Tim Kuhan, City Council. Travis Dillard, Urban Renewal Advisory Council.
Rudy Kellner, volunteer for the Urban Renewal Budget Committee and also the City Hood River Budget Committee.
Brad Wilson, City Council and Chair.
Chris Lodge, Finance Director for City.
We'll go with staff, Dustin.
Dustin Nielsen, Planning Director. Rich Rice, Public Works Director. Adam Schmidt, Operations Manager.
Mark Morris, Administrative Services.
Kevin Burdick, Planner.
Haley Elliott, Management Analyst.
And chair is empty, but Jen Gray, city recorder. And I want to call out Adam Schmidt, who was promoted this year. He's been working as interim operations manager for some time and has officially accepted that role. So congrats, Adam. Very happy to have you here.
And then we also have a couple people that are doing that.
Yes, thank you.
Do they want to say hi or are they good?
Christy Chapman, Port Hood River Commissioner.
Heather Garing, Port of Hood River Commissioner.
Thanks. Now we can go to
Great.
the presentations.
Thank you. Got a presentation I'm going to come here to do, but I'll also have some of you submitted questions in advance. Thank you for that. And I just feel like I did not email this to Jen to get to our folks that are on Zoom. I'll get that afterwards. Here we got, I think, just 4 or 5 questions, and then there are answers. So I'll just hand these out. I'm happy to follow up with their additional sections.
You get all of the forms.
I was practicing earlier and left it on the last slides. Thank you all for being here tonight. I think Hood River is probably one of the cities that has done urban renewal the best. I think we have such a good news story. It's exciting to be with all of you tonight. I am skipping the mechanics of urban renewal and how it's funded and how that works, but if you have questions, happy to follow up with that. Some of you have heard that from that little speech probably 20 times and can teach it yourself. So, but recognize urban renewal in the river. We currently have 3 districts. if you come to my taxing district presentations, you know I do a quiz. So the top purple blob there with the extra piece, which district is that? Waterfront. And the one in the middle? Columbia Cascade, and then the long skinny one? The Heights, good job. So I'm gonna get some representative, you guys can all stay and pass. Some representative pictures from each of those districts. That one on top, anyone recognize where that area is? It's before and after. The 1980s. It's the industrial way.
No.
So, if you're looking up, you can see Double Mountain
What's that?
coming up on your left there, wholesale Flint Street. That second picture. Councilor Stupina declared this his favorite spot in town, or his favorite city spot in town.
Sure.
It's the wastewater treatment plant. Big part of the waterfront urban renewal district was odor control, really making that a much more pleasant place to hang out. And then the third one is from the Heights, as we talked about what the connection will look like between Pacific and the Heights area. So exciting things, real tangible pieces. The way I'm going to structure this today is I'm going to talk a little bit about administration, then I've got a couple slides for each district, and I'll take a pause after each of those so we can review any district questions and conversations, if that sounds okay. And that first one is the urban renewal administration. So urban renewal at this point doesn't have its own staff, it uses a portion of staff. We have an intergovernmental agreement between the city and the urban renewal agency that accounts for how we do that. So I think it says like 20% of my time plus 20% of the time that of staff who I assign to the urban renewal district. So that includes real obvious folks like you might expect. It's Chris, it's Dustin, it's city recorder, pieces of that. But when we looked back, we have not actually adjusted the transfer amount in at least 5 years. I think it's been 48,000 since like at least 2017. So when we did the math, it comes out at 57,000 this year. When we so I'm gonna stop and say we have calculated at 57,000. It's actually less, that 57 is less than what that transfer really would be if we use that formula. Because as we look at an urban renewal administrator position, we've reduced the amount of both the finance director and myself, what our transfer would be. So there's a little better explanation of that in that memo that I just passed out, but just recognize urban renewal transfer money to the city for work that we do, and that there's a formula for that. The second piece here, and this is like the big piece, I feel really nervous being in front of you and saying, gosh, I want a whole new person for urban renewal. This would be a big thing. Although I think that urban renewal looked at this back in 2021. I think there had been a proposal for a position that was going to be half community engagement, half urban renewal projects. I think when the city tried to recruit for that position, they realized that person did not exist. And so ultimately made a full-time community engagement position and never filled any kind of special projects for urban renewal. So I think we've known for a number of years that urban renewal was some dedicated staff. On page 6 of the budget, you can see kind of my draft list of, we did some brainstorming, we said, here are the things we think would be a good fit for an administrator position. Some of them are really obvious, the Columbia Cascade district is really in a spot where we can hopefully finish that up. There's some projects there that have been languishing for a while. The Heights is really ramping up, so there's some areas where it'd be a good time for someone to come in. And then of course, we're looking at potentially 1 or 2 new districts in the coming years. And so that person would be involved in the creation of those districts. It's kind of all I've got for administration. Any questions, comments, thoughts? And otherwise, I'm going to dive into the actual districts. Great, thanks. So Columbia Cascade began in 1987. It is a mature district. It no longer collects tax increment. The full assessed value was released back to the tax roll, so our taxing districts received a small bump, or a big bump. Some of the accomplishments, it's so tangible, you walk by these every day. But the restroom on State Street, sidewalk improvements, paving industrial ways, I mentioned before, parking technology, all of these things were made possible through the Columbia Cascade district. This year, the current year we're in, plus this coming year, a couple of our focuses, are to focus on the intersection at 2nd and Oak. This would not be possible if we did not have urban renewal dollars. Our road fund is in a spot where we would not be able to do this for a long, it's a long overdue. Very excited for this. We budgeted $1 million. The bid has come in at I think 800,000. not, Rich is nodding, but we expect with change orders, it's gonna hit right about $1 million or even a tad over. The other important piece is in 2019, the city did a parking study. We've done, I think, about 21 of the 30 recommended activities, but there's still work to be done. So set aside some funds in there, and that includes that parking garage study. That would be part of that. And then also just a last spruce up of the district before it closes. This is kind of our last chance to replace damaged trees, to replace broken benches, to add some bike parking, some other finishing touches, really put that red bow on it before we finish that. And then the thing that I am proposing to you that is different and big is that in the waterfront district, there is the stormwater project, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. However, a big piece of that project is in the downtown core. So I am proposing that we use urban renewal dollars from the Columbia Cascade District to address stormwater line replacement activities that happen in the core. So some of these could be rain gardens, they could be bioswales, they could be other natural ways of addressing the waterfront or the stormwater that passes through downtown and then eventually makes it into the Columbia River. Questions or thoughts on that? That's big and that's different, although council and urban renewal agency has known for a long time, this is a big, we say this morning, a $9 million project. And so if Columbia Cascade can contribute to that, that would go a long ways. And I think some of those treatments could really look nice and downtown. Waterfront district. I think we love these slides where we show kind of the before and after 2008 and 2021. It began in 2008, will reach its maximum later this, look at Chris, this coming year or the year after? This year. And that will return the assessed value to the tax rolls, our taxing districts and the city will see a bump. This has been a big success and really, especially when I think back in 2008, you know, the focus on light industrial resulting in family wage jobs, recreation opportunities, including the city's waterfront park, and as I mentioned, odor control. It's never, like if there's ever an issue at Washington at the wastewater treatment plant, I hear about it. So odor control, A+. This district, which is huge, actually has a very easy budget because in 2020, the agency passed a resolution that all remaining dollars go to the stormwater line replacement fund. So as you look at this map, you can see the line in red, phase 1, I believe has been completed. Phases 2 and 3, the blue and green are still to be done. And then the green blob on the bottom, that is part of that watershed that goes to that feeds into that stormwater. Any questions about waterfront? Then finally, the last district that's currently underway is the Heights. It consists of 96 acres. So it's our other districts are just over 100. So it's small. It's not a particularly large district, particularly when I think of how much of it is in the public right of way. Right? When I think of how much of it is publicly owned. It has only one project, but it is a gigantic project. The Streetscapes project, which is made up of several big projects. So here we're looking at a roundabout at 13th and May. A traffic signal at Belmont and 13th, changes to the east-west streets, and in a multimodal connection between Pacific and Heights. Steps this coming year include contract and professional services work to begin work on any identified projects. I think we've definitely heard from the agency a real sense of we don't want to just do this plan and let it sit. We want to like get moving because the longer inertia will take over. We really want to be able to accelerate that. But we definitely recognize that additional funding will be needed. I think we're in conversation with ODOT about what possible funds they might make available. We're talking about a jurisdiction transfer. It's going to take more than just the urban renewal dollars to make this happen. So in November, the agency approved a contract to complete phase 3 of the project of the 8th Streetscape. And the primary task of phase 3 is the development of the preferred concept design, mostly worked on that, and then the implementation plan. The work plan includes updating typical street cross sections, developing a conceptual plan, view layout for key study streets, making refinements of the intersection concepts, phasing street and implementation improvements, developing a planning level range for probable construction costs, associated design, and then, as I said, so this is a huge project. Like the U of all spent hours and hours talking about, even just in the last couple months. So I appreciate all the time and thoughtfulness that you've put into this. I'm excited to like start digging some dirt. Any questions about the Heights? Great, you guys are making this so easy. There are two potential districts sitting out there. They're not reflected in this year's budget, but I want you to be aware of them as we go forward. The first one, of course, is the West Side District. You have all spent a lot of time contemplating this. We have an open house on May 23rd for the public. And then we'll be looking for both county and city council approval to create the district. If that goes forward, the district would be created on January 1st. But it would not actually have any dollars in the next fiscal year. It would not actually collect any tax increment until the following year. So we might start some actions, but the district itself will take a little while to get started. And of course, you all know that our goal with that district is to implement 3 plans that have already been adopted: the transportation system plan, the affordable housing strategy, and the multi-jurisdictional works plan. Any questions or thoughts on West Side? All right, then my very last one is just you and the port have discussed a potential new waterfront district. I think everyone had a consensus that we wanted to maybe wait a year and revisit after the port has done some community engagement and some more research, but just to be aware that that is still out there and there might be some potential actions in the coming year or the year after for that. With that, that's the overview of the Urban Renewal Agency and its budget. Any questions, thoughts, comments that we can talk about? I want to give special thanks to Chris and to Dustin working on this presentation and just all the work that they have done with Urban Renewal. It's been great.
Anyway, Jeff.
Abigail, thanks for the presentation. As I recall, the Urban Renewal Administrator is a limited duration position.
That's what I'm proposing, is that we look at for 2 years with the idea that in 2 years from now, we'll be in a different place. I'm hopeful that we will have closed a couple districts, we'll maybe have started some districts, and then we can have a sense of part of that person's responsibility to be like, what should we do going forward? Could be that we continue administrator, could be that we say, what we really need is another, I shouldn't say it out loud because Richard is excited, but maybe we need another engineer or whatever that might be. So we're starting with a limited duration and then study what we need going forward.
And that makes sense. I hope it doesn't affect our candidate.
That's very true. Yeah, we want to.
I have a question more for Chris.
Yeah.
Appendix 1, our debt schedule is empty.
That's correct.
Okay, just checking.
Yeah. The last payments on the debt were for this current fiscal.
Megan.
Thanks. I think 2 questions. I guess one, the administrator, I'm hoping would take more off of our other, city staff's plates than it feels like the budget's reflecting. Is there going to be an actual like tracking of hours and billing accordingly, or is it just the flat fee?
That's a good question. I also thought with the limited duration would be that we would kind of track it for study purposes, and then we could adjust, in the coming years. But I did think it would just be the amount that we've transferred over would be that single amount. Chris, do you have additional thoughts on that?
No, I think so. There is a intergovernmental agreement between the city and the Urban Renewal Agency, and in that is a formula as to how city staff is allocated. There is the ability to track hours in the document. It doesn't come, but it's not how it gets through. And so it's 20% of city staff that has been assigned. 20% of salaries and benefits of city staff has been assigned to the district, including this. The accommodation that we made for the administrator is to take the city manager and the finance director and have their salaries. So as to essentially not double bill.
I'm thinking that this person's most of the workload that they're taking off is probably the administrative work that Chris.
Okay.
We have talked we have talked about reopening. The IGA, I think, is a 2009 document. We have talked about potentially opening that up to bring it on.
Okay, yeah, I guess, I mean, and I know this is limited duration, but certainly if there's a long-term conversation of staff, I'd love to see some hour tracking because it
Yeah.
a little bit feels like the districts are getting billed
Hmm.
potentially, I mean, I don't think twice, but 1.5 times or something. And I know there is a lot of staff time from city staff and department heads, and so I don't discredit that, but. Yeah, just a
Mhm.
little bit of, I'd love in the future to have that conversation. And then kind of within that, you know, it's a very even breakout between the three
Mhm.
districts. And I guess it seems like, you know, not that there isn't work there, but like waterfront,
Agreed.
there's one thing that we kind of are already in the works for. Is it really equal staff time to the heights and everything that's gonna involve this year? Is there any value in actually billing the districts according to their workload or?
I agree. I think when we looked over the last several years, it has been, they each have paid the exact same amount. And so we continued that for this coming year, but I think that is something to be studied. And as Chris said, with there's an IDA. And part of having an administrator is I can't negotiate the IDA on both sides. So having an administrator who can sit across the table from me as we work through issues like that. Thank you.
I might be the only one in the room that doesn't know the answer to this, but I noticed the parking redevelopment went from like just shy of 3 million down to 288,000. I'm assuming we were planning on breaking ground sooner and then that just get pushed out and then now we're down to just
I think that's
professional
the-
service fees.
Is that the parking garage?
Yeah.
piece? So I think last year, I went back and watched the meeting and Will Norris, the finance director at Houston Urban Renewal Administrator, had really, he said he just parked, no pun intended, parked those dollars in that budget line. For, you know, they needed to get it out somewhere, so put them in there in that parking garage study.
So the 288 this year is just more from further studies,
That's,
professional services.
So we didn't do the study last year,
Got
so
it.
that 2 million or 3 million didn't get spent. It's just kind of sitting there, and I moved that around to say, I think I want to put that in that stormwater category as
Oh.
that, because I know that need is real.
So the 3 million was actually for construction.
It was actually to do, it was for a garage study plus other activities. You know, Councilor Zan Miller, you might remember better, but I think of you as my.
It's a bucket of money that's left over after doing the stuff and, you know, each year we re-anticipate what that's gonna go to. It never was enough to pay for a parking structure, so could it pay for the study and design and then a little bit of the construction TBD? And so what Abigail's suggesting is that it's the same size bucket, it's just gonna go into, they're suggesting slightly different things, leaving the study, which is sort of a responsibility that we took on as part of the downtown parking study to say, all right, we need to have an answer for that. And so that's one of the big last pieces of that effort. If that helps.
It does, thank you.
Thank you for the question. It's definitely a historical piece.
I've got a question, I'm gonna tag it on to Grant's question about the heights. So given that we have about, let's call it $8 million of indebtedness available in the Heights district.
Mhm.
And that we're gonna need like additional funding sources to, you know, it's gonna cost more. Do we have a base scoping done on what that number may be? And do we have a longer term kind of strategy as to what the reality of those funding sources will need to be? You know, do we have to bridge like 5 more million or 50? I have no idea what the
Yeah.
ROM is on the Heights.
And that's actually the very next step we are going to do is to price those pieces out, but please.
So I'm just gonna stand near the microphone.
Yes, please. You can stand.
As much as.
I'm sorry, not that much. So in November 2020, we, or the agency approved the phase 3 contract with the MIG. And that MIG contract will, part of the scope of work will be to develop the implementation and planning costs. So I think now, based on what we've seen in phase 2 in 2021 dollars, we were looking at 35 million for what it's about 17 blocks or about 3,400 linear feet of arterial streets and streetscape and 2 intersections. Will be interesting to see what 2023 did to that number, but so we're looking at a significant gap between maximum indebtedness from urban renewal and what the cost to complete is. Part of the implementation strategy
will be to look at phases. So whether you take this on at a $35 million project, or whether you can execute in phases saying, you know, the two intersections are 16 million, we can do the MI, commit the MI to that and then bond for that, or do proportionate share or some arrangements to try to eat this, you know, eat this sandwich in a couple bites. In a way that makes sense and that is, you know, really kind of a little more approachable by the size of city of our size with the budget that we have.
If that bucket could be matching money for grant type stuff, I think it's good use. I mean, that sounds about right. If it's 20% match and we have 6 million at the end of this, when we're ready to start doing it, that's probably what it's gonna be.
Yeah, certainly you can leverage local money to gain bigger money. We'll always do that if the strings aren't so significant that it becomes over us.
I was laughing at his 20% match idea.
Maybe this is just an extension of a bridge. That's
It's the off ramp,
Pretty much.
the on ramp.
So if I could just remind everyone that the Heights plan is more than May Street to Pacific. It actually is from Pacific to Brookside and from May Street down to Oak. So those are the other, this is the girth of the project. But we still have those other two sections to develop and to work on as well. So yeah, so maximum indebtedness, one of the questions here, that is a consideration and a concern. There are ways, you know, to negotiate that through different funding and different buckets of money, if you will, that are outside of urban renewal dollars. And there's also ways to potentially increase maximum indebtedness, as well as lengthening the duration of project.
Right.
Sorry.
Yep, you're exactly right. You could extend, you know, at some point you could decide to extend the district's life cycle or change the boundaries. I don't know how much extra dollars that would achieve, but those are options.
Chris, are we collecting money in the Heights District about the ramp that was anticipated however many years ago?
Oh, I don't know. I never saw original underwriting for the district. But the amounts that are in this budget is what is projected.
Right.
I will mention, I'm sorry, the just, it's interesting to see the life cycle of a district where you know, waterfront started so quickly and took off. The Heights is really the tip dollars have really come in kind of slowly, right? It was already an area that already had a lot of development. And so it wasn't like there's a lot of new development that was then increasing it quickly. So it's taking a much longer time to reach its maximum indebtedness. Each urban renewal district is unique in its own way.
Is there some, you know, I'm like a URA rookie here. Given there's an $8 million pot and like a $30-some million thing.
Yeah.
Is that like reasonable proportionality to, you know, is there a sort of a rule of thumb of proportionality between, you know, the overall investment and what the URA, how big the URA pot is? Or is that so unique to each project and possible other funding sources that it can be considered?
I don't have a good answer for that. You can ask Elaine.
You just stay up.
Yeah. Don't go anywhere.
It's definitely unique, based on the circumstance, based on the goals of the district itself, I think, and also the funding pool that the city has. What other resources do we combine with urban renewal to make it unique? Is it the only, you know, is it the only tool that can be used to this, or is it part of the, you know, the funding cocktail? Do we have SDCs coming in? Do we have development happening that we're using the developer contributions? It really fits into the whole perspective. So I don't know if there's necessarily that positive ratio. And I think for the Heights being an example of it, I think it was a little amorphous in when it was born, like the projects themselves. And I think it has, you know, we're seeing a circumstance where cost of the improvements and expectations, such a radical escalation. We would never have anticipated what was happening there, so.
And this coming year, really, with the ROM study, this will be the formation of the recipe of the cocktail, right? And next year we'll show up and we'll kind of see the recipe and see if we have money to buy all the ingredients.
Right.
Is that kind of the idea?
And some of it, you had, this discussion of, we're taking this road. We're presumably going to take this road over from the state's jurisdiction. So there's the kind of. The optics or the relationship between, the cost to transfer it. We're taking a road that I would say is past its useful life cycle.
Yep.
And hence the issues that we've identified, we will take that to the state and say, okay, there's a cost to transfer this. This is not an asset, this is a liability. So that, those are also funds that I will expect that they will come up with. And that hopefully, again, we take this and leverage those funds into more funding opportunities.
Just in the spirit of this conversation, so, when we are working on the city budget regarding, money allocated towards finding grants, can that be diverted to the urban renewal agency to find? So just, yeah, yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yep. Look at all of our funding options. Right?
Yep.
Package them.
Any other questions? Megan?
I don't know how much there's a question here, but I guess the, $2 million to stormwater and Columbia Cascade. I guess I did want to highlight that it seems like a very big change. I know you highlighted it, but it is, and I don't have the parking study memorized, but are there things that we were gonna do in that won't get done because, we're allocating 2 million to stormwater, or like what gets lost in that trade-off?
Yeah, and I don't know that I have a good handle on like the price tag of the remaining items. I mean, except for the parking garage, which is probably $15 million to even think about. I feel like most of the things are fairly small. There's wayfinding, which we talked about last time, that there's actually some dollars attached to wayfinding,
Right.
in the city budget. There's parking, bike parking, there's some additional upgrades. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head again, with the parking study, what were the outstanding items?
I'm rely on Mark because I don't remember.
I remember them being huge. We will finish the replacement of the Dunkin' meters this year, right? Dunkin's are the ones that you put your quarters in.
And that's within this.
This like by June 30th, right? I'm getting on, so I
Aren't they in the budget for next year?
think these are finished.
Question for Chris and Abigail, which is. We haven't talked about this a ton at council or
Right.
urban renewal we're approving a budget. Is there flexibility? I mean, what's the legal size of the bucket? Do we still have, how much flexibility do we have to move stuff around between stormwater and parking structure, vice versa?
Within a district?
Within that district, within this year?
All right, so correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh, and
when we approve the budget, we will be approving it based on an expenditure. And so there'll be on service expenditure and there'll be capital expenditure. To the extent that a project gets substituted within those categories, there's flexibility. If the budget changes, that's when you're talking about how to understand supplemental budget change, right, or just a budget amendment.
So capital has to stay in capital and material and services. So question then for Abigail, I don't know that we're gonna spend all 2 million in this next year, no matter what, right?
right,
Can
just like we didn't spend it last year.
can we put? So right now it's sort of capital heavy, half of the buckets and capital. My guess is we couldn't spend that 2 million even if we wanted to.
Well, actually, I mean, that is, so for that particular project, and that particular line item, that is actually comes into play as an overlap in the city budget. So I mean, that stormwater project, I believe we put it will be complete next year. So that 2 million is part of I think as you mentioned, that 2 million is part of like a $9 million project. So very likely gets spent next year.
Okay, because I was gonna suggest, if we're not gonna spend it, let's budget.
Give
you
flexibility.
Yeah, flexibility. Exactly.
It is different, so what I was referring to earlier was last year, in the parking garage, right, the $3 million there was there as a placeholder. It wasn't associated with a specific project. Right, so this is different in that this is associated with a specific project that is slated for construction.
So we basically have a half and half materials and services and capital to make fine adjustments during the fiscal year.
And if I can have one more comment about this is a project that, it's a big project, not on the Columbia Cascade plan, so I assume we have to go through the minor amendment process, which is new to me, and I have to figure out what that means, but I want to say that out loud.
I just need clarification, but to the point of these are different buckets and you can't move between capital and materials. Am I hearing correctly that basically we have to make the policy decision if we're gonna spend that 2 million? I guess just in capital, not necessarily for this. But we have to kind of make that policy decision now because we can't change it later, or.
I think you can do a supplemental budget, but I'm glad that Monica's.
It would be a supplemental.
It would take a budget action.
Okay.
Correct.
But we're not locking the district into.
No,
Okay.
I mean, we need predictability, but no.
Right,
not-
but I mean, we
But
haven't
not-
had this conversation.
Exactly right.
Before,
Yeah.
and it is kind
It's
of a
big.
big deal.
Yeah, and it's not sexy.
Well, that.
I mean,
That part's fine.
It's sad about putting it there, but boy, that is a huge $9 million project to $2 million.
I disagree on sexy.
Thank you, counselor.
Okay, yeah,
You're exactly right.
Okay.
Big. Just big.
It is a big deal and it has potential to beautify certain.
That's true. Thank you. Yeah, and I think, my opening comments to the city budget talked about infrastructure, and this is one of those that might be settling on us. We have to make some hard decisions and actions around infrastructure. This feels like one of the first ones. But yes, before we could actually do anything, we need to have a bigger conversation.
okay, yeah.
And same with parking study piece, right? Like put some placeholders like parking study activities. But, I don't have a good sense of the prioritization of those activities.
I'm sorry, since I'm here. And then you said parking meters are gonna be done this year, but there's 85,000 in the budget for next year.
I'm looking at Adam and
That's gonna be just for maintenance. They're replacing some of the doors as well on the. I believe some of them, they don't need credit cards, something along the lines. I know there's a dozen, half dozen even doors replaced. But that's what that's.
But 85,000. Maybe we've over.
Yeah, it could be over. I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. Because we can't do general maintenance and.
This is where you say, he says replace the door, yes, fix the door, no.
Okay.
I have a question about, just generally about stormwater runoff. Assuming this gets built and put in, does it have beneficial effects on our stormwater treatment plant, slowing down flows into the plants, making things run more smoothly, predictably, et cetera?
It's a stormwater treatment plant.
Because it's not stormwater, it's stormwater, not wastewater.
It's stormwater, not wastewater. It is a stormwater treatment plant.
It shouldn't be.
During the winter.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Unless it's like some kind of cross connection where stormwater is moving into wastewater. Stormwater going into the wastewater treatment plant actually is a big deal because rainwater has such a low acidity level, it messes things up. It's fascinating.
Yeah, and wrecks the capacity.
Yeah, I think you can overload the treatment plant. Sorry, I can talk about sewage forever.
Before, potentially other ones. Anyone have any additional questions? Christy, Heather, have any questions online?
No, you guys are doing a really good job with your questions, so.
Thanks.
Same here, no questions.
Okay. All right, that being the case,
That being back to you, then I
we
think
can,
it's our.
we can move on to the public hearing section. And I have a script. This is time scheduled for a public hearing regarding the proposed budget for fiscal year 2023-24 for the Hood River Urban Renewal Agency. We will now take public testimony. Sierra Recorder, has anyone registered to speak or provided written testimony? No. Yeah. Public hearing for the fiscal year 2023-24 proposed budget is now closed. Easy peasy. I move on to our deliberations. Does anyone have any additional thoughts, questions, concerns, anything we want to talk about?
I look forward to the future policy conversation.
For sure.
Okay, if nobody has anything to add, then entertain a motion if one comes up.
And there's just a motion on the agenda.
Just looking it up. I move to approve the proposed fiscal year 2023-24 budget as proposed. Yeah.
Second.
Then moved and seconded that we approve the 2023-24 budget. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Budget approved. Also entertain a motion to request the tax refund itself.
I move that the waterfront plan area and Heights District plan area request the maximum amount of revenue that may be raised by dividing the taxes under section 1C, article 9 of the Oregon Constitution and ORS chapter 457 as applicable. It's throwing in the room.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion approved, carries. And that's it, everybody. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you all.
We have answers. We can run that. Oh, it's not. We're gonna send animals to the crowd. New ones on Cascade Street there. But when it's like on State Street, Oak Street, when you're trying to use them, you can't really see it, and it's not very sensitive, and it's like that's.
I'm so glad you
I was gonna wait till I started talking.
I watched last year's and they were off for like the first 15 minutes.
I'm calling this meeting of City of Woodward Budget Committee to order. The time for cell phones, et cetera. First order of business is public comments. Oh, which we have in our packets. Correct.
Yes, I believe we had received two items of public comment. Oh, there's seats over here. One was from the Energy Council and one was I just gave you a memo from CAT, from the Columbia Area Transit, just the information they had given, which I think we presented to you previously.
Yeah, they each requested 20, is that correct?
CAT requested 10 and then they went by 10 and then the Energy Council has been ongoing, it was 20 last year, requesting again 20 and then it's mostly a report of just their activities.
That's right. Okay, thanks.
And I don't see anyone and just want to check, no members of the public. Great.
Thanks. Great. Next order is our public works budget. All yours.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm gonna fly through the brief overview of who we are and what we do. Starting with here. So this shows us everything we're responsible for: streets, storm, sewer, collection systems, treatment plant, engineering. We got 6 office staff, which consists of a management analyst, project manager, right-of-way inspector, office manager / permit tech, operations manager, and director. Then we've got 12 public works crew members, and so they're split into some divisions within ourselves. We got the roads division, we've got storm and sewer division, parks division. We have a lead mechanic who does fleet management as well. They're required to know all aspects of our organization. That way they can kind of fill in as needed with other departments. So we also provide technical support to other city departments through like engineering. And right away permitting, sign permitting, things like that. Here is our estimated 5-year capital project costs split into categories. So you can see sewer ops is taking up the bulk of it. A lot of that's because sewer projects are deeper than water projects, so got to go way down in the ground. Some of the big projects include under sewer ops, like elevated sewer is going to be a really big one that's important, one of the most important to me, because I think above ground for some unknown reason. We got to get to that underground. We've got a bunch of clay sewer pipe replacement projects to address I&I, which is a pretty big problem. We've got a facilities plan that we're budgeting for in the wastewater treatment plant, which will help pursue funding, hopefully. We got a gas smithing project that was kind of put on hold in costs, but we're going to be trying to do that. Clarifier sweep replacement in the water department. We've got lead jointed pipe removal projects that are mandated to remove those by 2031. So that's taking up a lot of the water. And then of course in the storm, it's the waterfront storm line. It's taking a lot of money. Roads, we have big ODOT projects, Cascading Grant. Here's some sweet pictures of roads. These are your doors and the Calais machines. Screens are the doors that we're upgrading in urban renewal. So I have a picture of that. This tree was from the, I think, a storm like a few months ago, I believe. We had a pretty big storm. Fortunately, so basically roads provides maintenance and repairs in the right of way. That includes paving and patching, sanding, plowing, tree maintenance, parking meter maintenance, things like that.
Some of the big capital projects here are the second and the traffic light, the big one. You guys will be seeing in the summer, which is much needed. We've got the elevated sidewalk project, and it's partnered up with ODOT. Yeah, it's sidewalk. That one is at 13th of May in front of the Providence section there. Many of you may not realize it's an elevated sidewalk, but it's definitely elevated and we have to replace it. Let's see, Safe Routes to Schools, I think is also included in this as well. Working on some projects with that too. Sanitary sewer, there's our sweet vac truck. It's a combo truck, it's a vacuum better truck. So basically the sewer department maintains and repairs our sewer lines. They also do root abatement. A lot of our sewer lines, especially in the old parts of town, have roots penetrating the road, which is causing some of the ionization issues because they're 100-year-old clay pipes. So a lot of times we have to kill those roots. Lift station maintenance, we used to sub that out, I think, in previous years, but we convinced our crews to jump into the wet wells and get dirty. So that helps out with costs and helps out the treatment plant as well. Yeah, some of the big capital projects coming up are the Eugene Street 9th to 12th, which is a water and sewer replacement project. Again, it's clay pipe. Wacoma Park is down 10th Street or 9th Street. There's a line that needs replaced and it cuts through the Wacoma Park Hill. If you guys can kind of imagine that. We're going to try to slip line that. It's a part of the project, but slip lining is not going to be advantageous. We can't find any other parts. We're going to piece that together, but the plan is to line that project to that. And then again, the elevated sewer is a big one as I got to start final design. Yeah, start as well. Here's some pictures of why sewer projects cost so much money. I mean, the middle picture you can see this was on Sherman Street project. We had a gas and a water line in the way, so we had to brace them together as we're digging the trench so they don't bust into our trench. And you can see the private lateral coming in underneath it. And on the right, boulders. We got boulders, and it's random. So it's funny. We have geotech reports of every project, but you know we're not going to make the street Swiss cheese. So we only take like 2 or 3, and they always seem to just miss the boulders. And everything looks great when you see the geotech report, and then you get out there and see it. So we've been accounting for them in the estimate and the bid sheets. We didn't at first, but we're learning on this. So and then manhole installations. Stormwater, here's Riverside Drive there. Previous projects. So our sewer department also manages the stormwater department. They do emergency response. I know we had some flooding, I think, previously when we had some of those big rains a few months ago. They try to do some preventative street sweeping. So the catch basins do not get clogged. Some of them are very hard because they're shallow for some reason and they fill up rather quickly. So it's hard to keep up with some of them. Yeah, some of the big storm projects, really, mainly our biggest one is the waterfront storm replacement. We do have a Hall Street project that's not, it's in for design this upcoming fiscal year. I think it's for the following year. That one will have some storm water component. Hopefully we can do infiltration rather than piping it out, because that obviously gets a lot more spending. Here's some more pictures of the waterfront storm project. The middle picture again is what we fought. A lot of groundwater. We kind of knew there'd be groundwater. You can see the big pump system that they had wasn't really keeping up, so we had to modify the locations. So, but change orders, of course. So always a challenge. You can see how far down it was. Wastewater treatment plant. This is the team. We've got Jacobs and Windsor. Jacobs has been operating the treatment plant for a really long time. 30 years, 30 plus years. Louis been there 30 years, and I think he started with them. So they've been there a long time. Windsor was brought on 2 years ago, I want to say, to help manage it. So yeah. I want to talk about this, yeah. So Windsor, oh, yeah, so I know there's a lot of confusion, not a lot, but I think some of the industry are confused. So Windsor basically is the administrator. They manage the capital improvement projects. Jacobs is the operations, so they just manage the operations. Jacobs' contract is up after this fiscal year, so we're gonna have some decisions to make as a city, as you know, RFP it out or negotiate contract extension. Yeah. It's an old treatment plant, so a lot of projects that need to happen on it. You guys. Then we go to our water department. Kelby showing off his guns. Basically, they're managing 83 miles of drinking water pipe. This includes the meter installation, a lot of the new developments that you see, they're installing it. We got about 3,600 service connections, 1,500 water valves, a lot of PRVs, 400 hydrants, which seems like a lot, I don't know. That's what they say. And then every year we're doing water quality analysis. We got the hypochlorite system. And then repair and maintenance. And the big projects there again in Eugene, we're doing some PRV replacements, and then dehydro is also underwater.
And what's PRV?
Pressure reducing vaults. Yeah. So those regulate the pressures throughout the town. So I think from what I'm told, 43 is kind of a lot, but it's needed because right at them because of our hills. I don't know what to compare it to, but yeah. And like I said, dehydro is also. Here's some pictures of water projects. Not as crazy as the sewer ones. Just to show you what, and again, this is why they're a little less expensive, because they're not as deep, so you don't have to fight a lot of them. Fleet management. We support the police vehicle fleet. And they work on our public works vehicles. Engineering, HBH right now is our development engineering review. They've been doing it for a year and a half, I want to say. And so I feel like they're starting to hit their stride. They've been doing well for us. Basically making sure all of our engineering standards are met, right? City infrastructure protected, things like that. Involved in capital projects. So HBH is private. We've got an interim city engineer, because as you guys may know, Wade is retired for him. So we kind of team up with Grayling Engineers as our current interim. Hopefully we can address that soon. In this department also is right away inspections. John Clark does that. He's the new Rick. Yeah. There's our empty desk. And then honor of Rick. We are hoping, like I said, to fill internally soon the city engineering position. Encouraging me, so I'm not going to jinx it. The private side we're trying to hire in-house. We've been trying for a while. Not as successful in that end, unfortunately. Council work plan items. So we have the dehydro project, as everyone knows. State process school and then CAT. So basically our project managers have been working with CAT. Whenever they request bus stops, it goes through the right-of-way process. He evaluates it along with our right-of-way inspector, see if it makes sense. So we're excited for them to have their master plan go through and get approved, so we can start hammering out some more long-term stops for everyone.
Rich, can you say 2 words about the dehydro, what it is?
Yeah, so it's basically converting our high pressure water line out deep into energy. It's the theory behind it. So it's all hydrology, basically. And we still have some things, some hurdles to clear to make sure that our water system is protected. But the theory is, they have this box in there that essentially, as the pressure is coming through, it's generating hydroelectricity. And then,
Is it a significant amount? Seems like there's a lot of water coming from up high, right?
There is, Haley, you dove into this, dived into this.
It's projected at around 650,000 kilowatt hours per year with degradation year after year.
So I don't know how that compares, yeah.
So is that a lot?
It will help. It will help.
That really helps.
Yeah. Yeah. And then Public Works Future, found this cool picture of Oak Street. I forget when. Anyway, so basically, we started a construction blog. I don't know if everyone's seen it or not. I think it's live. With project updates for construction. We know that was a challenge in the past. So hopefully people are looking at it and the updates are tough, so bear with us because I know paving's changed like 6 times now in the past week and a half for one of our other projects, Prospect. We have a plan to switch to AMI, advanced water meter technology. I don't know if Adam wants to speak on the benefits of that. But you on the spot. We can say that if anyone has questions on it, but basically it's so we can start reading meters remotely rather than having to go track it down. And it'll tell us if meters are broken, if someone has a leak, you know, things like that. It's really the next step, honestly.
Isn't that in this fiscal year? Or part of it?
No, I think it's in the next one. I think,
I know we approved something.
yeah, so you approved the pilot program. I think, is that what there was a pilot program.
And the RFP.
Oh, yeah, and the RFP, correct. Yeah, and so treatment plant, like I said, facilities plan will be a big step in that. That'll take about a year to get that wrapped up, and funding really is the big funding seems to be a challenge for us, so I'm really looking forward to what's out there. That's it.
Not a lot.
I tried to be quick.
Any questions? Yeah.
Yeah, is the elevated sidewalk dovetail with the proposed change to 13th in May?
So it is factored into that,
Okay.
With the roundabout.
Yeah.
Yeah,
In other words, like, maybe does it make sense to stop doing it if it's just gonna get completely
so we
bulldozed?
talked about that. If you look at the rendering, I don't think it touches that northwest corner. Yeah, that is something that we had thought about for sure. Honestly, like, there's really nothing else you can do with that corner anyway, so it will definitely have to change that, right?
Okay.
I think if I could add to that, I think a big part of that will be timing as well.
Right,
I think
Yeah.
the elevated sidewalk needs to be addressed very, very soon.
right,
And, you know, we've not had the discussion yet about when a roundabout might be.
sure.
Yeah, I would love to wait. Anticipation of the roundabout's gonna come sooner rather than later. I just don't know the time frame. I mean, we had done a structural review of it and it is safe, but we want to shut it down right now. I don't know if we could go multiple years, so.
Is the CIP update in this next fiscal year's plan? Just the capital improvement plan for any, pick one. Road, sewer, wire.
So, well, I mean, we update that every year. Is that,
Well, we know the things that we're spending are costing more than we projected years ago, which means we're eating the bottom of the list, right? So what's the new cost for the list, and then, and at what point do we need to work out either rate and so I guess for this meeting, it's just, are we starting that process in this year and the funding of it, or is it
So
the next year?
DIP this year does reflect our best guess in future costs. If that's what you're asking. So,
Do we need to increase rates sooner or later?
okay.
I think we've been generally, you know, we look at what we can do and we push things out. You know, so we haven't dropped things off the list, they just keep moving.
Sure,
you know, down the.
Sure, they're not,
the future.
yeah.
Yeah, but I think there are two things. One, we've we recommend an SDC study this year. We made that one of the council priorities that I think would weigh into that. And then I think we're on year 3 of a 5-year rate study or rate plan. And so probably next year, after, we're gonna have to do a rate study, and I think this would feed, what do we need, the CIP will feed into that, that's the conversation.
Right, and they're budget related, I mean.
Yes, totally.
We're gonna have to pay for the studies and.
Yes.
They're gonna impact the revenue and.
Yeah.
For sure, so.
In the wastewater treatment plant facility master plan that
Right.
that Rich just talked about would definitely feed into, you know, what do sewer rates need to look like in the future based on some of the CIP projects we haven't even identified yet.
So the budget reflects keeping those things moving, I guess that.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's a very
If few words
iterative
make
process.
sense, then those would be.
It does, and I think when they did that recently, we had capital, I think it was I don't know what kind of projections on project cost we did into that. So.
So for there's a couple of interfund ones slated to happen from the fleet replacement fund. Kind of implies that you're short of funding somewhere for some projects. Can you give us an idea of the projects?
And I'm gonna, some folks might have right not received this little memo and pass this around because that is one of the things addressed in this as well. So
Yeah.
sorry. Take one pass around if you don't have them. Okay. And when you get. Thanks.
So that's it, that's all.
Some people already get one.
So the fiscal 2023 budget. So the current fiscal year originally proposed a $4 million loan from the fleet fund for capital projects in public works. We anticipate, based on our budget update, that there's about, I want to say, like $1.2 million that gets extended for this current fiscal year. And then for fiscal 23-24, there's another 2.7 that gets extended. So it goes $1,275,000 for water fund projects, $1,300,000 for sewer fund projects, and then $125,000 for storm fund. So it's.
I guess my question is more based on that.
Yeah.
You know, why are the funds needed?
So if you look at the 5-year capital improvement plan, I think we're budgeting $14 million capital just this year, right? And so there just simply isn't enough between existing balances and revenues. There just isn't enough capital.
And what is the nature of that?
I mean, one is just the side of construction projects. And I think that the other is that some of the funds that did have some significant balances have spent those balances on existing projects.
And that's because.
I mean, again, just what projects we were taken. I think, you know, some of it, the most recent projects have been because construction overruns. You know, so you know, it is not uncommon for projects to be $1 million, right? 25.
I guess that's what I'm trying to get. Construction overruns and.
I mean, it's a combination of construction overruns, but then also just the sheer volume of projects that are being done. And as Rich will pass, the infrastructure for Head Rivers is fairly old. And I think that some of it has been kicked down the road for some time.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's been kicked out. Honestly, I mean, the lead joiner projects, we have like 28,000 feet of lead joiner pipes still. That we have to get rid of by 2031. So, and we've known about it since 1985.
Sure.
As a city.
Yeah,
So
I'm not,
I just
questioning that.
I think the issue now is we're at the point where projects are really expensive and it's kind of jamming us up. There's a lot that needs to happen.
The question, my concern is more about trends. Is it something that we're trending towards in the future?
Yeah, I think that the short answer is yes, right? This municipality is not alone in that. You know, to this extent, the city, and I think this is what we talk about in the budget, we're going to be looking at sort of a bonding strategy, whether it's revenue bonds tied to water and sewer revenue, you know, whether it's a larger bond measure, whatever it is, but for longer term infrastructure projects, bonding is suitable, right? Because these are, sort of 30-year duration projects, right? As far as just lifespan, and so the bonds are sort of 25 to 30-year bonds, right? So it's long-term financing tied to sort of long-term obligations. So the question remains, at what point should you really be financing these as opposed to spending cash, right? So using the intake cash for debt service, right, as opposed to funding construction projects.
So does this feed into the whole rate question?
Yes, I think both ratepayers and SDCs. So I think one other piece of kind of where shortfall, particularly in the road fund, is we've not had a road SDC for very long. So that fund, didn't have a lot to start with. And I think we accept looking at other cities, I think that was a pretty low rate one to be studied. So rate studies, SDCs, bonding, and then I think the other pieces, if you've been on this journey with us to build the intersection at Cascade and Rand, I think we have some tough decisions about, do we allow ODOT to do some work? Are there things that make more sense for us to do in-house as a city? The difference between Second and Oak, which we're doing, and Cascade and Rand, the numbers are huge. So I think there's a lot of different pieces. We need to come at this from a lot of different angles.
So is this part of, we've talked about on council, about, talking about developing a bond.
Yep.
Strategy.
Yeah, and this budget includes funds for a bond strategy consultant.
But the bond strategy had involved parks and the four lines.
There's a whole universe of, right, there are lots of things. I know Chief Damien is on the line, and he's talked to me about a previous agency where he worked bonded fire trucks. So I think we hope, I look forward to having that conversation about, here's kind of the universe of eligible projects that we could do with bonding, and then talking about which ones make most sense for the city.
The other thing is, a lot of these initial wave of projects that we're doing, I'll call it, I guess, that we've been doing for a year, 2 years, and planned for the next year or two. These are like the worst offenders. So we had the IMS study, right, which showed like which parts of town are the worst. Like, so the hope is, a lot of these projects had both water and sewer that need replaced. I think, we're gonna have to start getting creative because of the budget, and maybe just do water only projects in the streets instead of a full street restoration. It's not ideal, because it'd be nice to replace both, but if we have to start getting creative like that, then yeah, we're gonna have to. So. But a lot of these projects are in design with the hope that, you can bundle them up and go for funding. So we have projects in this coming fiscal year that are like design only. So for that reasons, to make them shovel ready, that way, if we do find some kind of funding mechanism, we can package them together. Yeah.
And I expect that we will collectively we'll be talking more about revenue bonds as it relates to public work projects. That's my guess. Because as it relates to the individual funds, so stormwater, water, sort of roads, sewer, the user fees that are paid can support, right, debt service and can be underwritten. And it would seem that it would be appropriate to discuss bond financing for those types, specifically for those type of road utility public works projects.
Look forward to the discussion.
If I could chime in, to me, it's sort of like you've got a P&L and you've got your balance sheet here, and these are long life assets that are going to be in the community for an extremely long period of time. And to look at them from a do we have the budget this year standpoint, is like, I know that's like I'm oversimplifying it, but that's like incredibly short-sighted, right? Especially if these things are effectively, a lot of these things have, they smell like deferred maintenance, right? Or they smell like they're very, very deferred for a very, very long time. So, I'm particularly, I'm very into the idea of getting more strategic in terms of financing these, because these are strategic projects. These are not Band-Aids. These are long-term things. So we should have long-term things should be financed in a long-term way, not necessarily from like, oh my God, we don't have the budget this year in the P&L. It's a mismatch. The other thing I'll say on that topic is looking at the 5-year CIP. there's a drop off, it goes from like 14 now, because we have visibility, we know what's in front of us, to like 4. I'm assuming the real number is not 4 in 2027. It's probably, it's 10 plus. So, right, as we think about a long-term financing strategy, we should be really, realistic about what the run rates are going to be over a long period of time on these things, so that, we're not presenting only a $50 million view over the next, 5 years. It's probably going to be a bigger nut to manage than that.
Yeah, I think if we were at a wastewater treatment plant facility needs, I think that will feed into this. And the other is, we did a I&I, which is infill and infiltration, is that correct?
Infiltration.
Oh, wrong ways. And I don't know if all of those projects are reflected here.
No, I mean, that's part of the long.
Yeah, so we've got some studies that are not necessarily.
Yeah.
Without looking, I think some of those are because, we have like a big elevated sewer that'll
Sure.
take up a lot, No. I'd love to do 10 projects a year. But
Oh, I mean,
I think staffing is the other part of that too. Yeah.
sure. If I could stay on that topic, with respect to the wastewater treatment plant, given that, you're going to be looking at Jacobs and figuring out, a longer term contract, I would say that one of the things I would recommend you guys work through, and I know it's a, half Windsor thing because they're the engineers and Jacobs are operators, but they operate a ton of plants everywhere. So they know what a good plant looks like, or not, they know what a modern plant looks like.
Yeah.
So I think that needs to be part of the conversation with them with respect to renewing them, is what is the real long-term, plan to get us into the 21st century on that plan? Because that's going to be a number that is significantly bigger than, this 5-year view, obviously. And then given that we're looking at hiring a grant writer, I would assume there's a lot of things, but one of the, there's infrastructure money out there, and this is something we can't do alone. There's going to be money that we should pursue, and I would hope that Jacobs could be part of that conversation to find, because they're helping other jurisdictions.
Yeah, I've had this conversation.
Right?
Yeah.
Find that kind of money. So let's use other people's money as much as we can, and make that part of the negotiation with guys to keep them going.
And from what I understand, I mean, the treatment plant, it's easier to get that than some of our other projects. So and it all starts again from that facilities plan, which is why I'm pushing hard for it. But yeah, absolutely, Jacobs, sure. I mean, we've been having this conversation. So
So using that good deferred maintenance concept, knowing that you probably need a lot of studies to determine just how much is needed to get back to even. Is your sense that we are making progress, or are we staying even with deferred maintenance?
I think we're making progress. I mean, there's projects that we have started, Cascade, Sherman, the Prospect, that's seemingly going on forever. And the next wave that's coming, like Eugene and all that, I think that's progress. I don't know if that was really happening in the past. I don't know. I feel like there's going to be progress. And honestly, those are in the parts of town that are really just bad. I mean, it's clay fight, right? So it just needs to happen. I don't know if that answers.
Well, as a gauge, we're private business standpoint, you have rules of thumb. I don't know what the rules of thumb from the municipality standpoint is of what staying on top of maintenance looks like in terms of spend.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I feel like we're playing catch up. I mean, a lot of this should have been addressed probably a long time ago, and then we'd be able to look at pipes and say, all right, well, this one looks like it's starting to fail. What do we need to do to not have it fail? I'd love to get to that point. I think it's going to be a while before we get to that.
I think bluntly, you said we've got to replace the leaded joints by 2031. I'm going to say from now to 2031 is all catch up, and trying to work through some of that backlog. And I'm hopeful that if we hit the early 2030s, we will be starting to maintain and replace and put things on a asset schedule that I think we don't have in some areas. I do think one thing that the city in the last several years has done a really good job is really identifying and understanding what we have out there. I think when the leaded joint problems came up, I think that was they're not problems, but they are state law, we have to replace them. I think that was a surprise when that came up and we weren't aware that we were already behind. So I do think that we've made progress identifying what we've got plans to move them forward. It's just real limited as to what we can do every year.
I don't want to discredit the scale of the issues, but I do want to say that this is the issues the city is dealing with is something that's very common for all local governments and
sure.
special districts.
Right.
Both from the end of the match available from state and federal folks has dropped dramatically over the last few decades. And there isn't local funding to fill that gap. And also just it's a very common occurrence of, keeping rates low means that you end up deferring maintenance until it's at a kind of point of, oh no, we shouldn't have done that, but now we have to fix it. So we are not alone in that. It's a big deal, and I'm thrilled we have staff that are really diving into it, but this is not the city on its own.
Sometimes I take comfort in the fact that, we have clay pipes, not great. City of the Dalles has pipe that is made of wood. They're replacing wood pipes in their water system, so it's all kind of relative.
Any questions?
Oh, no.
Oh, believe that. If hypothetically you do accrue a lot of debt via bonding, et cetera, we know what the sensitivity is offhand, how it would affect our bond rating, what the interest rates would change to on and on. Because I assume if we go this route, we would need to pass those costs through to our rates, thus our customers. And this could become a cascading thing the longer we let it go.
So I'm gonna answer your question with the questions that I would have for our bonds.
Yeah.
And so I think it starts with, I expect the process is going to start with sizing what is our current available debt capacity given the existing infrastructure, right? The next step would be making sure that we understand what our CIP sort of project list really looks like over the bond term. Because, I don't want to say you get one bite of the apple, right? Like you're doing sort of 30-year bond, right? You probably it's 15 years before you're looking to refinance, right? So you're gonna start with what is your sort of, where do you size today? What's your project list look like? And the question is, if you want to satisfy that, where do your rates need to be to support a bond measure that will cover for that, right? So I expect that will be sort of, I'm hoping that's the process that the bond consultant will take us through. But I can't tell you specifically, where I think our rates are today. I do know that some of the revenue loans that we have been using, they sized about a 1.25 debt service coverage ratio. So I think it's going to be something along those lines. Who knows where rates are? And I do not know Hood River's current bond rating. I do know that 2 or 3 years ago there was an upgrade.
I think it's on page 19.
All right. Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
The notice questions next on our list is the public hearing.
Yeah, it's not public works related, but the cat request, is that already in the budget or would that?
No, that's a new, it came at the last minute.
Okay.
So that would be an ad.
What?
The cat request for.
It's
And same thing with the energy committee.
The Energy Council, I believe, was in as 15,000, but it was supposed to be 20,000. That was my mistake. I got it wrong. It was 20,000 in the current year we are, so it would be no change, but it is wrong in the budget.
as part of our agenda after the public hearing, I will go through those things that we talked about and corrections. So
I have a question about those 2 requests.
Yeah.
And I just want to make sure that council has strings that we can put on things and that it's not I don't think that's a budget committee thing, but on both of those things, I think that there's policy provisos and conditions to that, but I don't think that's for tonight. I think tonight we're just saying, is there a little, are those outlays.
Well, we can also talk about those during deliberations too.
And I would say, I don't know anything more about the cat request beyond what is in that, just simply the timing was. It came so soon and I asked Mayor Blackburn if I should bring it to council for a special request and just trying to slip it into the budget, so. That's why that one is gonna begin people's side door. It's 90.
The dollars are fine, it's the.
Right, what does it mean?
The idea. Yeah, I think that's the first thing.
We can talk about it a little bit.
Okay.
All right, this is the time scheduled for a public hearing regarding proposed budget for fiscal year 2023-24 and the use of state shared revenue for the city of Hood River. We will now take public testimony. So has there been anyone registered to speak or provide written testimony? Nope. The public hearing on fiscal year 2023-24 proposed budget and use of state shared revenue is now closed. We did it. All right. Our proposed budget and summary of changes to be amended. Or do we need to do a state shared revenue motion first? I think we need to do the state shared revenue motion before the changes.
Sure.
Yeah.
I will move that state revenue sharing money be used for the purposes shown in the proposed fiscal year 23-24 budget.
Second. Rudy gets it. So moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion?
We moved to get more money from the state.
All of them.
Second. Motion amended and seconded.
No, I'll keep it at the appropriate language.
Tongue in cheek. All right, we're sticking with the original motion. Correct. Thanks. Okay, on the original motion, any further discussion on that? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes aye, motion passes. Now, okay, thanks.
Okay, so. All right, so this is proposed budget correction modifications and corrections. Mistakes have been made during the budget.
You're doing great.
Okay, so I want to start with the general fund. And so these are some of the things that most of these we have touched on in other discussions. So it's just an update and review. So starting with the general fund, this is in, if you want to follow along the book, this is on starting on page 29 and 30. So on page 30, there is a line item in your budget book for the city council, city contributions / donations. Currently that line item is $15,000 that originally was there for the River Energy Council donation. The Hood River Energy Council donation is actually $20,000. That's what it was this current fiscal year. That's what was requested for next fiscal year. So that is an update. And then the next one that Abigail mentioned is the ODOT carbon reduction program. This is a 50% grant, 50% match along with CAP for a grant application for an e-bike pilot program. And that request was $10,000. So that line item would go from $15,000 to $30,000, $5,000 increase for Hood River Energy Council, and $10,000 for the ODOT carbon reduction program. We had discussed on the revenue side that the interest revenue calculation was incorrect. It was calculating off of a much larger assumed balance. So that will be adjusted to represent 1% of the beginning balance. So the amount that's currently there is $200,000, corrected to $48,300. And that's an impact of about $153,000, $160,700. In fire, which is on pages 38 to 41, we have talked about the state, we talked about the Oregon Fire Service Capacity Grant. The structure of the grant is that it is it's a credit against the 3-year salary obligation. So it pays 95% of the new position salary, 90% of the new position salary in the first year, 75% in the second year, and 50% in the third year. The original budget had assumed that that was going to be funded in each year. In receiving the documentation for the grant, it's a lump sum award. So the revenue for the fire EMS will be updated to reflect a lump sum award of $384,205. It's impacting the budget on the positive side of $239,405. In parks, which is page 42 to 44, this was just an omission. So Jackson Man Park, which is in the CIP, slated for construction for this year, was omitted from the park budget. So that'll be added as a capital outlay. The impact of that is $77,500. Again, that is an addition which is omitted from the budget. Each of these changes are just an offset on the general fund budget, and to the extent there's an overall impact, it's just going to come out of the opening balance, the beginning balance. So there's no additional funding other than the state grant. There's no other assumed funding or adjustments to the general. If there are any questions, I can move on to the next one. Wait. Okay, so I want to. These are changes on the sewer and the water fund. I want to start with the water fund. So, we have been working with Public Works going through Q3 results to see where we think we're going to end up at the end of the year. And so a lot of these changes just reflect on where progress is with regards to these projects. So in both the projects we're going to discuss, there is no overall budget change. It's more a function of where the money is being spent this fiscal year or next fiscal year. In the water fund, pages 66 to 71 in your book. In capital outlay, there is the UG 9 to 12 budget joint pipe replacement project. This is a budget to reflect fiscal year 2023 spending. The total budget for the project is $1.1 million. That has not changed. However, an additional $769,000 is being moved from this fiscal year to next fiscal year. Along the same lines, the beginning fund balance will be adjusted upwards for the same exact amount to reflect money that has not been spent this fiscal year. So in this instance, the capital outlay is balanced with an increase in the beginning fund balance. And again, just a reflection of monies not spent during this current fiscal year. In the sewer fund, there's one revenue addition. There's a FEMA reimbursement that was slated to be received this year, but looks like it's going to be Q1 of next year. That's $60 or roughly $70,000 reimbursement. That's been added to revenue given the expected receipt. Similar to what we just talked about in water, in sewer, on using the 10th Street pipe replacement. There is the addition of roughly $320,000 of project costs that was not spent this fiscal year that is expected to be spent next fiscal year. The difference, however, is that there have been other overages in the sewer fund for this fiscal year, primarily related to the Jacobs contract, the Jacobs contract extension, and I'm sorry, the amendment to the Jacobs contract, as well as the Windsor contract. Most of these, if not all of these changes, have been approved by council previously. Were not accounted for in the original fiscal 23 budget, and so needed to be accounted for in the budget. Ironically, those changes were roughly about $330,000. And so in this instance, the addition of the capital outlay spend, or the transfer of capital outlay spend from fiscal 23 to 24 also needs to be combined with additional loan proceeds to balance this budget. So we will anticipate that with loan proceeds and additional loan proceeds, roughly $320,000 will be added to the budget to account for these extra project costs and the overspend in the current fiscal 2023.
So that's the loan from the vehicle replacement.
No, so in the budget, there are vehicle replacement loans and there's also outside funding. So in this instance, this loan is from an outside source. Assumed outside source.
Question about these two projects and the red numbers. Does this reflect actual slower progress, like on the ground in the actual projects? Or does it reflect more differences in like progress billing or invoicing, but the projects are still like on track, but the money is moving slower?
The projects have been kind of shifted back, design taken a little.
Okay, so
longer.
actual work.
Actually.
Okay, actual work is later than anticipated, so
Yep.
we're spending money later.
Correct, yeah.
Anything else on these?
Same question I had for you earlier.
Just because you sit next to me, I think you have to ask me questions about them.
Loan proceeds is in revenue. I understand it's government accounting. Are we accounting for that long term as liability?
Yes, we do.
Thanks.
Okay. Okay, restricted revenues. We have discussed this as well in both of these instances. These are adjustments that just allow the funds, these restricted funds, to use the resources that are available. So in small grants, there currently was it started at an opening balance, no use, and an ending balance. In this instance, we're assuming in addition to materials and services, miscellaneous use, in the amount of the available balance to allow for the flexibility for use. We are going to see if it can be used for Columbia Cascade wayfinding signage, or if the structure of the fund is such that it has to be used for other purposes. But this allows for those funds to be used. And so the only change would be that it's using the opening balance instead of just not using it. Similarly, on the CET developer initiatives, this is one of the 3 construction excise tax funds that can be used for developer incentives. We are also adjusting material and services to make the flexibility for and make the assumption that those funds are used for developer incentives, particularly as it relates to Ram Road. So again, this would simply use the available resources within that budget, and we're earmarking it as if it's to the center of the Ram Road development project. I should mention, there will be a corresponding adjustment in the contingency, so that the contingency is such that it can be utilized as well. At its current level, it would be more than the 15% allowed to be sort of transferred. So we'll adjust contingency. But again, this is just creating the flexibility for use of the proceeds of both these funds. In compensated absences, this is page 120 and 121. This was an omission. So we had the addition in compensated absences of the charge to the individual funds, but there was no subsequent use of any of that. It was budgeted in our calculations, we just never made that. And so we're under payroll, for this fund. This is just the budgeted payouts for the next coming year. And I will mention that this was sized based on a multiple to historic spend. This particular fiscal year had a very, very high payout compensated absences. This particular budget is about 140% of the fiscal 2022 actual payout. So that's where we're at. And the last change is the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund. Similar to the Construction Excise Tax Fund, this change again just provides the flexibility to use the funds. So it's using all available remaining balances in the fund. There are obligations that exist under the Ram Road purchase and sale agreement. And so in part, these funds will be used to satisfy that obligation. And so again, the budget is going to reflect that the funds in the affordable housing reserve are potentially utilized for that purpose. So again, no additions, just using the available funds. I think that is sum total of the changes.
Chris, did you and I talked right before this meeting, did you have something more about Councilor Shapina's question about?
Oh, yeah, so. You had a question, last meeting about TNT and how we calculated it. And then there was, that was forecasted. And so there has been some confusion that has been circulating from, some presentations that have been made, that the TLT that's been received by the city or that has been 15% below, or 20% below last year. Our records show actually there's been a 15% increase or 12% increase for the year so far. And the reason for the error was that the payments that got made to Visit River were only a portion of funds that they will receive. So actually, instead of being sort of down 20%, we're up about 12%. And our projections for the year call us to be up about 6%. Sort of in total. So I just wanted to clarify that because there was some confusion as to if actual TLT revenue received is below budget, why are we so much why are projecting an increase? And it's just that it was an error, just an error in distributions.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Megan.
Thanks. With the bucket of CET money, moved to materials and services. I'm wondering about this, there's the second much smaller bucket of local CET money. Was there a discussion about also having that available as contingency or materials and services, or is there some reason we wouldn't potentially want to have it available?
So there are 3 construction excise tax funds. I'm gonna throw in a friend on one of it. But so there's a developer incentive. I believe that's the one that's the most flexible.
Yeah.
Then there's one that's just a pass through. Right? So everything received just gets passed through the state. The third one, I have to look at what it is and what we're seeing for it.
I'm guessing it's the city defined affordable housing program. Or no, that would be the other way around.
I don't think right now. I don't think right now we haven't proposed any changes that we discussed.
Okay. I mean, it's much less money. I'm just wondering in the realm of budgets being your total allowed amount to spend that we actually would spend that, but do we want to give ourselves permission if a project came up?
So,
and it may not be, the amount left may not matter, so it's really only $16,000, so it's maybe irrelevant.
yeah, I mean, so. Oh, okay, wait, no.
Can't hear.
This is different.
Oh.
So, okay, so.
I'm actually not looking at this, and I think if we're gonna do debt service, we probably shouldn't send it, so never mind.
Yeah, no, actually, so this fund covers debt service.
I know.
Right? And so it needs, it does not have money for anything else. Sorry.
No, yeah, thank you. Just need to talk it out.
Any other questions, Chris? Everybody? Then they set a public hearing for the proposed budget.
Yeah.
I will. This is the time scheduled for the public hearing of the regarding the proposed budget for fiscal year 2023-24 for the city of Hood River. We'll now take public testimony. Is there any? Nope. Public hearing on fiscal year 2024 proposed budget is now closed. Now move on to final deliberations. Chance for everyone to share opinions and discuss things.
Simply, I'm comfortable with the changes proposed by Chris and staff.
So I brought it up before, and I guess it was at the wrong time in the meeting. I'm certainly hip to the changes that Chris outlined, especially with the donation things, but I do want to make sure that we're having policy discussions and putting strings that are in the best interest of the city to those things. So I'm bringing it up to make sure that it's not a budget. I don't think it's a budget thing. We're gonna put it, if we put it in, we put it in, but then, and then council will decide and approve actual expenditure like we do at a million different places.
And I think for the CAT one, Executive Director Amy Schlafly would like to come and present to you what the grant would be and what the ask really covers.
Right.
So
Just go ahead.
yeah, just making sure I understand. So we can add it to the budget and then later make a policy decision.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm just saying that to this crowd
Right.
that's my assumption.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was my assumption as well, but.
Yes.
The timeline for Amy is tight. I think the grant is 31st, so I can ask her if she can come to the my meeting on Monday. And if not, provide us with more information.
That'd be great.
Great.
This doesn't relate necessarily to this budget. My question is for us necessarily, as we go through, as we evaluate bond measures, et cetera, I think it would be responsible if we also were aware of the size of the debt accrued ratio of interest payments versus revenues, all that sort of stuff, leverage ratios. Something that we can have next year. Okay.
On that point, we've been talking about both about revenue bonds much more than we've talked about capital bonds where we go out to a vote. And just to make sure that that's clear for everyone, is the revenue bond, my understanding, revenue bonds are, we have future revenue from water, bills that we send out to the residents, and we can actually get the money up front and then pay ourselves back with that revenue versus, asking folks to help us out for a different.
Okay, so this is where I have to be educated a little bit, but again, my understanding is there's three worlds, right? And so there's the revenue bonds that are tied to user fees. There are just general obligation bonds, right? That are just for sort of full faith and credit of the city. And then the last would be something that is tied with a specific levy, right? So a new levy, right, or additional levy that'd be for specific purposes of a bond issuance.
It builds its own bucket.
Yeah, and so and the question is sort of which of those requires sort of public vote, right, as opposed to just this discussion.
And I would, in that first one, the revenue bonds, I would add urban renewal to that as well. I think the way we've done urban renewal has been we wait for the funding and then on projects, as opposed to bonding it up front to jumpstart things. So I think, now we really couldn't really start on that project on the bonding conversation until we had a finance director in place. Like some of this experience, but I think we'll want to come to you with what does the RFP for a consultant look like? And maybe some of that can help us narrow down what are the pieces we want to focus on and what are the areas where we say, well, we're not really interested in that, but we want to focus on other pieces.
So you guys think you built the buckets in this budget to be able to have that conversation? I think that's
Somebody to take us on that journey.
Would that journey be complete by this time next year?
I don't know.
I would.
Pretty good sense.
The objective is to do.
Yeah, so Norway tapping.
Yeah.
For
Right.
these funds.
The objective is to do.
Yeah. I'll say is I think about the timeline with if it was a general obligation bond and we were going to the voters, probably 2026 is the earliest that we could take our turn on the ballot. Just politically, what I know about other districts and what their plans like. I saw a face there, so. that's just speculating about where I think the Parks District is, the county school district, others are,
These are all political realities,
Yep.
for sure.
exactly.
But I feel like, I mean, we covered this in our first meeting. It's not like we're chewing through the balance sheet at this point, given our current visibility and, you know, where we're like, this is to me, as a citizen, responsible, 12-month view with a longer term forecast of, oh yeah, we need to, deploy some, financing strategy to like really take care of it long term. It's like, it's, gonna get only tougher with respect to like deferred maintenance, all these like big things. So from my perspective, that's on council and you guys working with the finance director in the course of the next 12 months. And then, from like my little short-sighted P&L standpoint, like this budget, for me, it's it balances well and I like how it was presented but there's a bigger conversation to have and appreciate we're like teeing that up, which is great. We'll be back.
Any other comments, questions, deliberations, things we want to talk about? Go ahead.
I will move to approve the proposed fiscal year 23-24 budget. As with the amendments presented tonight by the finance director.
Second.
Move. It's getting in. It's moved and seconded to approve the 2023-24 budget. Any further discussions? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Chair votes aye, budget approved. Entertain the next motion. Anyone?
I move to approve taxes for the fiscal year 20, oh my god, taxes for 2023-24 fiscal year at the rate of $2.8112 per 1,000 of assessed value for operating purposes in the general fund.
Second. Moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
I noticed.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes aye, motion passes. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
We're adjourned.
Oh, I'm done.